Botting has been around ever since the earliest days of RuneScape Classic, as one of the longest lasting thorns in Jagex side. Back then, botting and macros were simply called RuneScape cheats and were a way for players to increase their levels without actually having to play the game. That left them with more time to play with Pokemon cards or something. Jagex has always taken a hard stance against botting, and since the game's release decades ago, they've devoted a lot of time and effort into their ability to detect and deal with bots and botting communities. But the bots have always fought back, and each time Jagex finds a new way to stop them, they find a new way to get around it. Some of these methods of evasion have been clever, and some have been, well, I will let Mark explain this one.
Back in Classic, one of the bots had something on it which was called a modmark sensor. If I said anything, then a bot would automatically reply, "Oh, hi modmark, how are you?" And then the next line would be, "Oh, sorry, my mum's calling me for my dinner, I've got to go, I'll be back." And then I went into this one area and I just typed "yo." And there were like 10 bots that all said exactly the same thing at the same time.
While Jagex have always claimed that their bans distributed to bots were mostly accurate, they've also tried some unorthodox methods that weren't necessarily foolproof. So the question is, how did Jagex make sure the accounts they punish are actual bots? By making them report themselves, of course. Hello RuneScape, my name is Wilmicid and I'm an avid RuneScape player. As a huge fan of the game and an exceptionally good boy, I've never broken the rules, badly at least, and I've never botted a single time. I am the kind of person who loves supporting movies where the protagonist gets the upper hand, however, and this is much like that. 2010 to 2011 was an odd time for RuneScape. Dungeoneering had just been released, which was the first new skill in 2 years, or minigame if you prefer. The year before, the CEO of the time, Mark Gerhard, had introduced a social skilling aspect to the game to allow players to AFK and chat more instead of having to fight for resources. A good approach in theory, because fighting for those resources had become a lot more difficult. Little did we know it at the time, a whole 40% of the player base were bots, and they were coming for your U3 specifically. RuneScape was definitely entering a new era, and maybe this wasn't entirely unexpected. After 10 years of the game being public, it was time to follow the current trends and adopt what was working for other games in an attempt to make RuneScape popular again. Unfortunately, membership numbers were falling faster than the followers of a just cancelled celebrity. Jagex couldn't afford to keep losing more. As a crucial time for the company, lots of ideas made it to the table. It was around this time that the plans for the bot nuke began, an update that would take down 90% of the bots in the game, 36% of RuneScape's population. The problem was, this would take down all of those memberships with them, and they couldn't afford to hemorrhage money on that scale in their current state. They'd have to find some way to get that money back if they were to press on with the nuke. The return of the wilderness and free trade was suggested, an idea that was later implemented, hoping that overturning the controversial update would encourage an influx of returning and new eyes. But until this influx actually happened, they still needed to avoid the potential lost revenue from thousands of paying bots. So they needed to find ways to punish the cheaters without actually banning them. And so the idea of skill resets was born. In the early days of November 2010, Jagex started silently handing out XP rollbacks to player bots, that is, the accounts of regular players who botted on the side to get their skills up. Don't confuse these with the dedicated bot accounts such as the ones used by gold farmers, which are played solely by bots with the intent to generate as much money as possible before being banned. These player bots would receive rollbacks depending on how severe the botting was, usually getting additional items and levels taken away in proportion to how much they botted in the first place. In theory, this was meant to undo all of the gains the player had made from botting on their account and set their progress back further than the point they were at when they first started as an additional punishment. Jagex made sure to keep this method a secret. While it had been rolled out to the players, they had no way of knowing that this had happened. From the perspective of the player base, there was a dramatic rise in numbers of legitimate players claiming they had been rolled back as a result of some sort of bug. On top of that, Jagex locked and hid all forum posts discussing the supposed bug, making players panic even more. People got worried that there was a new bug that could reset their account and no one knew what caused it. However, skill resets were not perfect and Jagex noticed the imperfections. A range of accounts would keep items they shouldn't have, such as skill capes for people reset back from level 99, XP counters with more XP than the account had total, and the adventurer's log, which since has been rebranded as Rune Metrics, would list achievements the account no longer had. Jagex had to double their efforts to make sure that any account faced with a reset would have all of these missed details set back with it. But here's the kicker. To review the bots that had received this punishment, Jagex put out a blanket statement. If you'd received a rollback, then you should send in a bug report. In other words, if you botted, then report yourself to us. And they did. Over the next few days, hundreds of players sent in bug reports saying they had received a stat rollback. On top of this, videos sprung up on YouTube from angry players claiming that Jagex had messed up and that they were all victims of a severe bug. Meanwhile, over in Jagex headquarters, their system was being flooded by endless amounts of reports, almost all of them unwittingly asking Jagex to make sure they were punished properly for cheating. As hard it is to believe, RuneScape does have a lot of good people in its community. Players were actually quite concerned about getting rollbacks, and all the time and effort devoted to their accounts could be undone by something outside of their control. A few of these concerned players were what Jagex calls ambassadors of RuneScape. No, not that one. I'm talking about a group of players that could be trusted with information and had a direct line of contact with Jagex. Content creators. Wait, hang on. No, sorry. That's the wrong script. Player moderators, that's the one. For those unaware, there's a secret section on the RuneScape forums visible only to player moderators. The head of the PMods at the time, Mod Steve W, made a post explaining to them that the stat resets weren't actually a bug. They were a series of intentional actions made by Jagex as an alternate form of punishment to botters, saying that resetting instead of banning was hitting the botters where it hurts. Around this time, there were more player moderators than at any other point in all of RuneScape's history, with 6,296 players wearing a silver crown. Steve W asked the PMods to keep this information secret and not reveal the information to anyone outside of the PMod community. Anyway, 3 days later, the information was plastered all over RuneScape's black market websites. Although, despite the leaks, the black market had actually figured out the situation for themselves. Given most of them and their friends were receiving rollbacks and they were fully aware of the common thread between them, it wasn't a surprise to hear that bots were being rolled back. It was important, however, that they got the news out to stop any more of their fellow cheaters from identifying themselves to Jagex. They had figured out what the purpose of the bug reports were, and the game was up. The reset system stuck around in different shapes after this, but it was clear the system in place had its flaws. But Jagex wasn't done trying out new ways to keep revenue going from rule breakers. In February 2011, Jagex introduced what they called the banned account reinstatement, allowing hand-picked banned accounts that were out of appeal options to simply buy their accounts back. Their skills would still be reset, but rather than only receiving the rollback, the account would be placed with negative credit in their system and so were unplayable until the specified debt had been paid. Jagex argued that it wasn't fair that membership fees were used to combat cheating and wanted the cheaters to pay for it instead. I'm not entirely sure how long this system was in place, but in October 2011, Jagex introduced the bot nuke, which, as mentioned earlier, effectively ruined 90% of the bots in the game and took down a large number of paying members as a result. Just over half a year later, in April 2012, we saw the first instance of direct microtransactions via the ability to buy spins for the Squeal of Fortune. While likely the results of many factors, it's likely that the lost revenue from the bot nuke was a contributor towards this. So, in a way, you could say that bots both kept away and caused Treasure Hunter. Great going, fellas. I had a friend myself back in late 2010 who refused to admit they were botting after being rolled back. I remember I started to believe him too because he was so sure that it was a bug, but hey, who knows? I'm not the smartest person in the world. Thank you so much for watching this brief look into RuneScape's history. Keep in mind that botting is still against the rules of RuneScape and is a bannable offense. If you didn't know that by now, I'd actually be impressed. Anyway, my name is Wilmison and I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'll be back in just a little week with another exciting look into the forgotten tales of RuneScape's dark side. So make sure you subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss it. I'll see you all then. Goodbye now.